So what I was saying is that, you know, we're in this process that actually is a process that starts from the bottom with information and about learning and taking evidence. You'll be spending your time discussing it. And at the end, that deliberation, where you're drawing conclusions together, is based on this idea of what you've learned or what you've taken in. I won't misspell. Okay, so if we're talking about evidence, and we use the word evidence because basically people will be coming and talking to you, and they're there to provide the evidence, provide evidence about both what climate change is, but also around what's going on in Devon and what could be done differently. But it can take a number of forms and be presented in a variety of different ways. So we tend to refer to these people as coming and giving us a witness evidence. And there's essentially three different types of people that will be coming and talking to you. People who are these kind of knowledge experts, so people who have studied or learned about the particular topic they're coming to talk to you about. Stakeholders, so people who are involved often in, you know, campaigning or in sort of trying to change things that are being done. So they will come, and they will come with a perspective and try and convince you that actually what they're suggesting is the right way forward. And it's up to you to evaluate that. And then we'll also have what we're calling experiential witnesses. So people who actually are just coming and talking about their own experience, things they've seen, their own personal insights, their lived knowledge. And all of this evidence, you know, has to be sort of considered and evaluated by you. Now, we're making a commitment to you that as best as we can, we're going to ensure that across the course of the Assembly, the evidence that we present to you is balanced and diverse, that hopefully it's accessible, meaning that, you know, like it will make sense, but at the same point that it is robust and it's credible. You know, we're really seeking out people who really know what they're talking about to come and talk to you. But it's up to you how you evaluate it and how you evaluate what you're told critically. So a couple of things. Whatever evidence that is presented on any topic, evidence is not self-evident, needs to be interpreted, needs to be put in context, needs to be related to all the other things that we know and we believe and that we value. And that's really important when considering what you're being told throughout the Assembly. And facts are not neutral, okay? Just because it's a fact doesn't mean that you can interpret it the same way, used to support different arguments. So for example, if I was to tell you that like 80% of people, and this is a made up fact, 80% of people think that the broadband service they receive is adequate for their needs. So 80%, that sounds like we're doing pretty good. But the same information, if I presented it differently, to talk about the 20% who actually think they have a terrible service, doesn't meet their needs, or 1 in 5 people doesn't think it meets their needs, you might draw different conclusions. And knowledge, you know, isn't all the same. It comes from different sources. And the fact that actually you're not coming along here as sort of these empty vessels that know nothing. You have knowledge. And the knowledge that you share with each other, the things you know, and the things you think you know, and the things that other members know, or the things that other members think they know, will also help build up the information you'll be using to start drawing conclusions and through that deliberative process. So what we're encouraging you to do is this process of, I suppose, critical thinking, stepping back and looking at the evidence from different angles, asking questions about the information that's presented to you. And when we're talking about critical thinking, it's not about necessarily being critical, not about trying to sort of find flaws in the information for the sake of it, but it's more about recognizing the cognitive biases, okay, that we all have. And we all have them. And it means that even when we listen to the same information, we don't always hear the same things. Now, cognitive biases really just means the usually unconscious ways that, you know, the way the information is, that the usually unconscious ways that we process information and we think about information differently and we hear different things. And it influences our judgment and our decision making. And we all have them, and it's perfectly normal. And actually, it's really quite useful because in day-to-day life, they help us. Because if we actually had to critically and deliberately think about every decision we made, we'd never get anywhere. But sometimes they create patterns that can be unhelpful in a process like this, that's focused on trying to focus on the learning, focus on the evidence, and being open-minded to that type of inquiry and what we solve. And I guess the thing about cognitive biases is that they're not just individual quirks that sort of, you know, that one or two people have. There's many recognized and quite sort of systematic forms of these biases that repeat themselves across populations and influence most people. So by recognizing them sometimes and stepping back from them, it's a bit like taking a walk in your own head and trying to understand why you intuitively react to certain things in certain ways and question why. Maybe you're just more questioning or more doubtful of some people or more willing to trust the information that others give you. So in terms of cognitive biases, a couple of things that are worth maybe thinking about in the context of something like this assembly. There's this idea of confirmation bias that actually, you know, by and large, most of us have a tendency to sort of both react more favorably, but also remember better the information that confirms the things that we already kind of believe or think that we know. We're less likely to pay attention and really remember things that, you know, make us question what we think we already know. Another one is this idea of in-group bias. We generally have a tendency to treat people that we view as sort of similar to us or like us more favorably. And we tend to give, you know, more weight, like intuitively give more weight to what they say than to people that seem different to us. Because again, it's that sort of, well, you know, we all value what we own, what we think ourselves. So we tend to value people who we see as being like us. There's another bias that comes up quite naturally. It's that inclination to kind of stick to our guns about the things that, you know, we think we believe when presented with new information. We really encourage you in this process to try and step back, have that open-minded view that goes, well, hang on, why did I believe that? What evidence did I have? Okay, that's why, that's fine. But actually, if it was just because I kind of think so, maybe open up and see what another perspective might bring. And this last one, well, second last one, identifiable victim bias. It sounds very, very complicated, but actually, when we hear stories about, you know, the impacts, and in this case, the impacts of climate change, we tend to generally give greater weight or greater sort of, we have that emotional reaction to stories that tell of, you know, the impacts on a person, a specific person. And we tend to sometimes step back from some of the bigger statistics that don't necessarily always have the same impact on us because it's happening to a large number of nameless people. So it's about thinking how we evaluate these different types of evidence that you'll hear. And finally, the last one, most of us like to be liked. And although we've talked about trying to sort of work agreeably and find consensus and support each other, there is a risk that actually this sort of, you know, there's a tendency to respond in ways that we think other people want to hear. And it's really important through this process that actually we do have, as much as we can, those open and honest conversations that allow for disagreement and that get past this idea of sort of a groupthink, I suppose, that is about minimizing conflict. Now, we don't want conflict, but we also need to acknowledge that actually this is difficult. And there's You know, it's a weighing up difficult choices. So while we're trying to find where we can have common ground, we also need to step back and do that sort of critical evaluation of different viewpoints.